My daughter asked the hospital director for a shot so I wouldn't wake up. But that wasn't even the worst part. On the third day after my surgery, I was headed to the restroom near the operating room when I overheard a conversation between my daughter and the hospital director. The words sliced through the half-open door like knives. "She already signed the estate documents," she said. "Tomorrow morning give her the shot so she won't wake up, and 25% is yours." I was frozen in the hallway, clinging to my IV pole. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own daughter, Virginia, the girl I had raised alone after her father left us, was negotiating my death as if she were buying groceries. But then I heard something that made everything 1,000 times worse. Dr. Roberts' voice replied with a chilling calm. "This isn't the first time we've done this, Virginia," he said. "No one suspects a thing when a 67-year-old patient doesn't wake up after surgery. We'll say there were complications." I felt my world collapsing. It wasn't just my daughter's betrayal. It was a criminal plot. It was a business of death they had carried out before. Now, let me explain how I ended up in that hallway, at the exact moment I found out my own flesh and blood wanted me gone. It all started 3 weeks earlier, when Virginia showed up at my house with that smile she always wore when she wanted something. I was in the kitchen preparing tamales, my hands covered in dough, the steam filling the room with that fresh corn scent that always reminded me of my own mother. I had spent the entire morning cooking because I knew how much Virginia loved my tamales. She hadn't come to visit in 2 months. "Mum, you smell delicious," she said, walking in without ringing the doorbell, as if she still lived there. She gave me a quick, meaningless hug and sat down at the table, phone in hand. She didn't even look me in the eyes. "I made your favorites, with chicken and green sauce," I told her, wiping my hands on my apron. "Do you want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "I don't have much time, Mum. Ryan is waiting for me." "I came because I need to talk to you about something important." It was always something important when Virginia came to see me. It was never just to spend time with me, to ask me how I was, or to reminisce about the years it was just her and me against the world. I sat down across from her, drying my hands that still smelled of cumin and cilantro. "Tell me, honey, what do you need?" "Mum, I've been thinking about your health." Her voice sounded concerned, but her eyes never left her phone screen. "You've been complaining about stomach pains for months. You need to get your gallbladder removed." I already spoke with Dr. Roberts, the director of St. Mary's Hospital. He's one of the best surgeons in the country, and he owes me a favor. He can operate next week. Next week. Everything was already decided without my input. "I don't know, Virginia. Surgeries are dangerous at my age. Besides, the pain isn't that bad. I can manage it with a good diet." "Mum, don't be so stubborn. If you don't have the surgery now, it could get worse. It could become something serious. Do you want me to lose my mother because of your stubbornness?" That sentence hurt me more than any gallbladder pain, because it sounded like she cared, as if she was genuinely worried about losing me. A mother always wants to believe her children love her, even when all the signs say otherwise. "All right," I whispered, "if you think it's necessary." Virginia smiled, but it wasn't a smile of relief. It was a smile of victory. "Perfect. Oh, and Mum, there's something else. To get admitted to the hospital, they need some documents. You know, medical authorizations, insurance information, that kind of stuff. Dr. Roberts gave me these papers for you to sign." She pulled a thick folder from her bag and placed it on the table, on top of the corn dough stains. There were a lot of pages, with small print and medical terms I didn't understand. "You should explain to me what I'm signing." "Mum, they're standard hospital forms, authorizations for the surgery, consent forms, nothing important. Trust me. Trust me." Those 3 words a mother should never question. I signed every page where Virginia pointed with her finger, without reading, without asking. I signed because I believed my daughter was taking care of me. I signed because I thought it was the right thing to do. I unknowingly signed my own death warrant. A week later, I was at St. Mary's Hospital, in a private room on the 3rd floor. Virginia had insisted that I needed privacy to recover well. The room had beige walls, a window overlooking a grey parking lot, and that disinfectant smell that gets into your lungs and never leaves. Dr. Roberts came to see me the night before the surgery. He was a tall man, about 50 years old, with perfectly styled silver hair and a smile that showed off teeth that were too white. He wore an immaculate lab coat and a watch that probably cost more than my house. "Mrs. Johnson, it's a pleasure to take care of you," he said. "Virginia has told me so much about you. Don't worry, the surgery is simple. You'll be back home in less than a week." Home. How ironic that he would use that word when they had already planned for me never to return. The surgery was on a Tuesday morning. I remember the ceiling of the operating room, the bright lights that looked like artificial suns, the oxygen mask covering my face, the voice of a nurse telling me to count backward from 10. I got to 7 before everything went black. I woke up with a dull ache in my abdomen and a mouth as dry as paper. Virginia was sitting next to my bed, but she wasn't looking at me. She was texting on her phone, her perfectly painted coral nails tapping the screen with urgency. "How do you feel, Mum?" she asked without looking up. "Sore. I'm really thirsty. I'll tell the nurse to get you some water. You need to rest. Dr. Roberts says everything went perfectly." Perfectly. That word also sounded strange coming from her. The next 2 days were a blur of pain, morphine, and Virginia's brief visits that lasted exactly 15 minutes. Ryan came once. He stood at the door, asked how I was with the same enthusiasm he'd used to ask for the time, and then left. None of my other relatives showed up. Virginia had told them I needed absolute rest, that visitors were forbidden. On the 3rd day, I felt a little better. The pain had lessened, and I could stand up with help. I needed to use the restroom, but the nurse wasn't answering my call. I decided to go alone, dragging the IV pole. The hallway was strangely empty for mid-morning. I walked slowly, each step a small victory. I passed other rooms, hearing the murmur of TVs, the coughs of other patients, the soft crying of someone who had probably just received bad news. And then, as I passed near the director's office, I heard Virginia's voice. I stopped. Something in her tone made me stand still, breathe slowly, and sharpen my hearing. She already signed the estate documents. My heart started beating faster. What documents? What estate? Tomorrow morning. Apply the injection so she doesn't wake up, and 25% is yours. The world stopped spinning. The hallway began to tilt. I clung to the IV pole so hard my knuckles turned white. "This isn't the first time we've done this, Virginia. No one suspects when a 67-year-old patient doesn't wake up after surgery. We'll say there were complications." There it was. The confirmation that it wasn't paranoia. It wasn't my imagination. My daughter was planning to murder me, and the doctor I had trusted was her accomplice. My legs gave out. I stood there, in that empty hallway, feeling every word from that office bury me a little deeper. I wanted to run, to scream, to break down that door and confront them, but my body was paralyzed by fear and betrayal. "And are you sure she signed everything?" Dr. Roberts asked. His voice sounded so casual, as if he were discussing the lunch menu. "Completely sure. She signed the estate transfer, the power of attorney, everything. My lawyer already has the documents recorded. As soon as she dies, The property automatically passes to my name. $800,000, doctor. It's a huge estate in the suburbs, with a colonial-style house included. $800,000. That was the value of my life to my own daughter. The estate my mother had left me, where Virginia had grown up, where we had planted trees together, where I had taught her how to ride a bike. All of it reduced to a number in a bank account. Ryan already has interested buyers, Virginia continued. People from the city who want to turn it into a boutique hotel. They want to pay in cash, quick and clean. Perfect, Roberts replied. So tomorrow at 6 in the morning, that's when the nurse shifts change, fewer witnesses. I'll inject potassium chloride directly into her IV. It will cause immediate cardiac arrest. It'll look completely natural. I've used this method 4 times before. It never fails. 4 times before. There were others. Other children, other families, other elderly people murdered in this hospital, while everyone believed it was God's will or complications of old age. And the autopsy? Virginia's voice sounded worried now. There won't be an autopsy. I'll sign the death certificate. I'll put post-operative complications, age-related heart failure. It's what I always put. The authorities never question my word. I've been the director of this hospital for 15 years. Esmeralda was 67 and had just had surgery. It all makes sense. I felt nauseous, not from the surgery, but from the ease with which they spoke of killing me, as if I were a mere transaction, an obstacle between them and the money. My brother doesn't suspect anything, does he? Virginia asked. Then I remembered I had a brother, Stephen, who lived in another state. He didn't even know I was in the hospital. No one suspects anything. Besides, you're the only legal heir according to the documents she signed. Your brother won't be able to claim a thing. I heard the sound of a chair moving. They were getting up. They were about to come out. I panicked. If they saw me there, they'd know I had heard everything. Maybe they'd move up the plan. Maybe that shot would come tonight instead of tomorrow. I desperately turned the IV pole and started to walk back to my room as fast as my post-op body would allow. Every step was agony. The surgical wound burned. I felt the stitches were going to burst, but I couldn't stop. I reached my room just as I heard the office door open. I scrambled into bed, closed my eyes, and tried to control my ragged, noisy breathing. My heart was beating so hard I was sure they could hear it from the hallway. I heard Virginia's heels approaching. She walked into my room. I stayed completely still, pretending to be asleep, praying she wouldn't notice the cold sweat on my forehead, the trembling of my hands beneath the sheets. Still asleep, Virginia murmured. I felt her presence near my bed. I could smell her expensive perfume, that scent of jasmine and vanilla that I had once found so elegant and now made me sick. She stood there for several seconds that felt like hours. Was she thinking of doing it right now? Was she considering suffocating me with the pillow to get the plan done sooner? Finally, I heard her footsteps walking away. The door closed softly. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. Tears began to roll down my cheeks, and I couldn't stop them. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, of helplessness, of a betrayal so deep I felt it had torn out my soul. How had I ended up here? At what point had my daughter become this? I remembered the nights she was sick as a child, and I'd stay awake by her bed, putting cool cloths on her forehead. I remembered the times I worked 2 jobs to pay for her college because her father never sent a dime. I remembered her graduation, when she hugged me and said everything she was, she owed to me. Lies. It had all been a lie. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 11 in the morning. I had 19 hours before Dr. Roberts came in with that lethal injection. 19 hours to decide if I'd stay here and wait for death, or if I would fight. My body was weak. I had just had surgery. I had tubes connected to me, a fresh wound in my abdomen, legs that could barely hold me up. But I had something more important. I had the truth, and I had 19 hours. I sat up in bed slowly. Every movement was a reminder that my body wasn't ready for what my mind needed to do. I disconnected the oxygen monitor from my finger. An alarm immediately started to blare. A nurse came running in seconds later. She was young, maybe about 30, with her hair in a ponytail and kind eyes. Her name tag said Jade. "Mrs. Johnson, are you all right? Your monitor disconnected." I stared at her, trying to read in her eyes if she was part of the plan, if she knew what Roberts and Virginia had planned. I needed to trust someone, but how could I know who? "I need to talk to you," I whispered, "but close the door first." Jade looked at me, confused, but she obeyed. She closed the door and came closer to my bed. "What's wrong? Are you in pain? Do you need more medication? I need to get out of this hospital. Tonight. And I need you to help me." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Mum, you just had surgery. You can't leave. You could have complications, an infection, internal bleeding. If I stay here, I'm going to die. But not from medical complications. I'm going to die because my daughter and Dr. Roberts are going to murder me tomorrow morning to get my property." The words came out rushed, desperate. I expected Jade to think I was delirious from the medication, to call security, to sedate me and leave me there to my fate. But she didn't. Her face changed. The surprise turned into something darker, deeper. Recognition. "Tell me everything," she said in a low voice, looking toward the door as if she feared someone might be listening. "Tell me exactly what you heard." And at that moment, I knew I had found the right person. Because in her eyes, I didn't see disbelief. I saw something worse. I saw confirmation. I told her everything. Every word I had heard in that hallway. The signed documents, the planned injection, the potassium chloride, the 4 times before, the $800,000. When I finished, Jade sat in the chair by my bed. Her hands were trembling. "My mother died in this hospital 2 years ago," she said, her voice breaking. She was 71. She came in for a simple hip surgery. Everything went well, according to Dr. Roberts. But 3 days later, she had a heart attack. He said they were complications, that it was normal at her age. He signed the death certificate that same night. There was no autopsy. My sister and I never understood what happened because Mum was doing fine. She was recovering perfectly. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. 2 weeks later, my sister sold Mum's house. A huge house downtown. It was worth like $1 million. I never saw a single cent. My sister said Mum had signed documents, leaving everything to her before she died. The silence between us was heavy, loaded with shared pain and rage. "Help me get out of here," I begged her. "Help me, and I'll help you find out what really happened to your mother." Jade nodded. "My shift ends at 10 o'clock tonight. There's less staff then. I'll bring you some regular clothes and disconnect your IV. You'll have to walk to the parking lot. Do you think you can do it?" "I'll walk, even if I have to crawl." The next few hours were the longest of my life. Every minute dragged on as if time itself knew I was in danger. Virginia came back at 3 in the afternoon with Ryan. They walked into my room with fake, worried faces that made me want to throw up. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Virginia leaned in to kiss my forehead. Her breath smelled of expensive coffee and lies. I had to use all my willpower not to pull away, not to scream in her face that I knew everything. "Tired," I murmured, keeping my eyes half closed. "It hurts a lot." "Dr. Roberts says that's normal. You'll feel better tomorrow." Ryan smiled from the doorway, his hands in his pockets, looking at his watch as always. Tomorrow. Of course. Tomorrow I wouldn't feel anything because I'd be dead. Do you need anything, Mum? Do you want me to stay with you tonight? Virginia asked, but she was already checking her phone again. She didn't expect me to say yes. She never expected me to say yes. No, honey, go rest. I'll be fine. All right. We'll be back early tomorrow. She got up quickly, clearly relieved to be able to leave. Ryan was already in the hallway. I love you, Mum. I love you. Those words that once filled my heart now sounded hollow, rotten, like fruit that was pretty on the outside but spoiled on the inside. They left. I heard their footsteps fading down the hall, their voices whispering something I couldn't make out, and then silence. I closed my eyes, and the tears came again. I couldn't control them. I cried for the daughter I thought I had and who never existed. I cried for all the years I spent working to give her everything. I cried for the foolish woman who had signed those documents without reading because she trusted her own flesh and blood blindly. But after the tears comes the rage, and rage is much more useful than sadness. At 7 in the evening, they brought dinner, a watery soup that tasted like cardboard and green jello that looked like melted plastic. I didn't touch a thing. I needed to be alert. I needed to have strength for what was to come. Jade came in at 8 to check my vital signs. There was another nurse with her, an older woman who looked at everything suspiciously. Jade didn't look me in the eyes. She just did her work in silence and left. I got the message. Not yet. We had to wait. 9 o'clock came with torturous slowness. I heard the shift change in the hallway, voices saying goodbye, hurried footsteps of people leaving. The hospital grew quieter, darker, as if it knew that terrible things happened within its walls when the world was asleep. At 9:30, Jade came in. She was alone this time, carrying a cloth bag. She locked the door from the inside. We have 20 minutes, she whispered. After that, the supervisor makes rounds, and if she doesn't find you here, all the alarms will go off. She pulled out a pair of grey sweatpants, a long-sleeved white shirt, and some old sneakers. They're mine. They'll be too big for you, but it's the best I could get without raising suspicion. She helped me sit up. The pain in my abdomen was intense, like someone was twisting a knife inside me. I took a deep breath, held back a whimper, and let Jade take off the hospital gown. Seeing my body was a shock. The surgical wound was a red, swollen line covered with bandages. I had bruises all over from the shots and IVs. It looked like a battleground. This is going to hurt, Jade warned as she started to disconnect the IV. She was right. The sting when she pulled out the needle made me bite my lip until it bled to keep from screaming. She helped me put on the clothes. Every movement was torture. Lifting my arms to get the shirt on made me see stars. Bending over to put on the pants almost made me faint. But I did it. I dressed as if I were putting on armor for a war. Now listen carefully, Jade said while helping me put on the sneakers. We're going to use the service stairs. They're at the end of the hall, near the supply room. No one uses them at this hour. We'll go down 3 floors. I'll take you to my car in the staff parking lot. It's an old white car. It won't attract attention. And then? I asked. I can't go to my house. Virginia is probably watching the entrance. I have a friend, Rachel. She lives alone in the suburbs. She'll help us. She's trustworthy, I promise. Rachel. That name sparked something in my memory. Rachel Miller, the one who lived in my neighborhood about 40 years ago. Jade nodded, surprised. Yes, you know her. She was my best friend when we were young. We lost touch when I got married and moved away. Destiny has strange ways of coming full circle. She'll be happy to see you. Now let's go. We don't have time. She helped me get out of bed. My legs were shaking like jello. Jade put my arm over her shoulders and held me firmly by the waist. Pressed together like that, we went out into the hallway. The corridor was dim. Only every third fluorescent light was on to save energy. Our footsteps sounded amplified in the silence. Every door we passed seemed to hide eyes watching us. We reached the supply room. Jade opened the door next to it, the one for the service stairs. The air that came out smelled of dampness and neglect. These were the stairs no one used, the ones that existed only for emergencies or for the cleaning staff to move their carts without bothering the patients. "Hold on to the handrail," Jade instructed me. "We'll go slow, one step at a time." We started to go down. Every step was agony. I felt my surgical stitches stretching, that something inside me was going to break. Sweat was running down my back. Midway through the second floor, I had to stop. "I can't, Jade. It hurts too much." "Yes, you can. Think about your daughter waiting for you to die tomorrow. Think about Dr. Roberts preparing that shot. Think about all the people they killed before you. Are you going to let them win?" She was right. The rage gave me strength again. I kept going down, step after step, floor after floor, until we finally reached the ground floor. Jade opened the door carefully. We were in a service hallway near the hospital kitchen. I could smell reheated food and industrial disinfectant. There was a security guard at the end of the corridor, but his back was to us, looking at something on his phone. "Quickly," Jade said. "It leads directly to the parking lot." The fresh night air hit my face like a slap. It was October, it was cold, and I was only wearing that thin shirt. But that air meant freedom. It meant I was still alive. The parking lot was poorly lit. Shadows of trees moved in the wind, creating threatening shapes. Jade guided me between the cars until we reached a small white one with a dented back bumper. "Get in quick," she said as she opened the passenger door. I fell into the seat. The pain was unbearable now. I felt something wet on my abdomen. I looked down and saw a red stain spreading on the grey pants. "I'm bleeding," I said in a shaky voice. Jade saw the stain and turned pale. "Damn it." Some of the stitches came open. "Hold on. We're going to Rachel's. She'll know what to do." She started the car, and we left the parking lot. I looked in the side mirror and saw St. Mary's Hospital getting smaller. That white building I had entered trusting they would heal me, which was actually my planned grave. We drove in silence on empty streets. It was almost 10 o'clock at night, and the city seemed like a ghost town. The lights from the street lamps passed by, creating hypnotic patterns. I pressed on my abdomen, trying to stop the bleeding, feeling my shirt get soaked with warm blood. "How much farther?" I asked in a weak voice. 20 minutes. Hang in there, Esmeralda. We're almost there." 20 minutes. 20 minutes in which I could bleed to death. 20 minutes in which the hospital would discover my absence. 20 minutes in which Virginia would receive the call saying her mother had escaped. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about the pain. I tried not to think about the blood. Instead, I thought about all the years I had lived being invisible, being the perfect mother, the sacrificial woman, the one who always gave and never asked for anything in return. I had spent 67 years pleasing others, putting their needs before my own, believing that was the definition of love. But love doesn't kill you. Love doesn't negotiate your death for money. Love doesn't sign your death warrant with a fake smile. I opened my eyes with a new determination. I was not going to bleed to death in this car. I was not going to give Virginia the pleasure of inheriting my estate. I was not going to let Dr. Roberts continue to murder elderly people without consequences. I was going to survive. And afterward, I was going to destroy them. The car finally stopped in front of a small house with a messy yard. The lights were on inside. Before Jade could ring the doorbell, the door opened. A woman my age appeared in the doorway, white hair pulled back in a bun, deep wrinkles around eyes I had once known very well. I hadn't seen her in 40 years, but I recognized her immediately. Rachel. My voice came out broken. She stared at me, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. Esmeralda, my God, is that you? I need help, I whispered it before my legs gave out and everything went black. I woke up in a bed that wasn't mine, covered in sheets that smelled of lavender and fabric softener. The room was dim, with only a small lamp on the nightstand. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was and why every inch of my body screamed with pain. You're awake! Rachel's voice came from a chair in the corner. She came to the bed with a steaming cup in her hands. You've been asleep for 6 hours. You fainted at my door. You almost scared me to death. I tried to sit up, but the pain stopped me. Rachel helped me sit up, arranging pillows behind my back. Slowly, Jade took care of the wound as best she could. Some stitches came undone, but we managed to stop the bleeding. It's not perfect, but it'll keep you alive. Where is Jade? She had to go back to the hospital before they noticed she was gone, but she'll be back tomorrow after her shift. Rachel offered me the cup. Drink this, it's chamomile with honey. It'll help with the pain. I took the cup with trembling hands. The warm liquid went down my throat like a hug from the inside. Thank you, Rachel. You don't know how much it means that you helped me without asking questions. Oh, I asked a lot of questions. Jade told me everything while we were taking care of you. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her face showed a mix of rage and sadness. Your own daughter, Esmeralda. Your own flesh and blood planning to kill you. I can't believe it. Neither could I, until I heard her words with my own ears. I took another sip of tea, feeling the warmth bring back a little bit of my humanity. Do you remember when we were young and you told me my biggest flaw was trusting people too much? Rachel smiled sadly. I remember. And I remember when you met that man, Virginia's father. I warned you he wasn't good, that he only wanted your money, your estate. You were right. He left when Virginia was 5 years old. He took everything he could carry and never came back. I stopped talking to you after that because I was too ashamed to admit you had been right. We were so foolish, Rachel sighed. We lost 40 years of friendship because of pride. We're not going to lose another day. I extended my hand, and she took it. Her fingers were as wrinkled as mine, marked by time and work, but her grip was strong. Rachel, I need your help, not just to hide. I need to stop Virginia and Dr. Roberts. I need to make sure they don't do this to anyone else. I know. That's why I called my son as soon as Jade left. Your son, Brian. He's a lawyer. He specializes in cases of elder abuse. He's won multi-million-dollar lawsuits against hospitals, against corrupt families, against all kinds of vultures who prey on the elderly. Pride shone in her eyes. I told him about your situation. He's coming first thing in the morning. I felt a spark of hope for the first time since I had heard that cursed conversation. Do you really think he can help me? Esmeralda, my son has been waiting for a case like yours his whole career. A corrupt doctor murdering patients, a daughter killing her own parent, falsified documents. This isn't just about your revenge. This is justice for all the people Roberts killed before you. The bedroom door opened, and a man in his 40s came in, tall, with glasses and a laptop under his arm. I heard voices. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Brian Miller. My mother told me about your situation, and I took the first flight from the city. We need to talk. He hadn't waited until morning. He had come in the middle of the night because he understood the urgency. He sat down in the chair Rachel had been in and opened his laptop. "First of all, are you up to talking? I need you to tell me everything from the beginning. Every detail, every document you signed, every word you heard. Everything." For the next hour, I told him my story. Brian didn't interrupt. He just took notes on his computer with quick fingers. When I mentioned the 4 previous cases Roberts had confessed to, his eyes lit up with something that looked like professional hunger. "That's crucial," he said. "If we can prove this is a pattern, that there are more victims, the case becomes federal. It's no longer just attempted murder. It's serial murder with a financial motive. Roberts could face life in prison." "But how can we prove something like that? I only overheard a conversation. I don't have recordings. I don't have physical evidence." Brian smiled. "That's where my work comes in. First, we're going to get back all the documents you signed. I need to see exactly what that paperwork says. I'd bet anything it included a property transfer disguised as medical forms." "But Virginia has all those documents," I said. "Not all of them. Hospitals keep copies of everything patients sign. It's the law. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to show up at St. Mary's Hospital as your legal representative, and I'm going to demand full access to your medical records. They can't refuse." "And what if they notify Roberts?" "Let them notify him. In fact, I want them to. I want him to know that you have legal representation now. That's going to scare him, and scared people make mistakes." Brian closed his laptop. "But there's something more important we need to do first. We need to report your disappearance from the hospital." "What?" "No, if we do that, Virginia will know I'm alive." "Exactly. And that's what we want." He leaned forward, his eyes shining with strategy. "Think about it, Mrs. Johnson. Right now, Roberts and your daughter think you're in that hospital, asleep, waiting for the injection tomorrow morning. But if they find out you've disappeared, they'll panic. Panic will make them act impulsively. Maybe they'll try to flee. Maybe they'll start fighting with each other. Panic leaves evidence." Rachel nodded. "Brian's right. Besides, if they don't report your disappearance, it's suspicious. A hospital loses a patient who just had surgery and doesn't say anything. That makes them accomplices." "All right," I agreed. The idea of Virginia knowing I was alive still terrified me. "What do we do?" "I'll call the hospital in an hour when it's morning. I'll say I'm your lawyer and that my client has disappeared from her room. I'll demand they check the security cameras, call the police, and start a search protocol. All by the book." Brian got up. "In the meantime, you need to rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." When he left, Rachel helped me lie back down. "Are you scared?" she asked as she turned off the light. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "But I'm also furious, and fury is stronger than fear." "That's my Esmeralda," she said softly. "The brave girl I knew so long ago is still in there." I was left alone in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of an unfamiliar house. Every creak made me jump. Every shadow seemed like Virginia coming to finish the job. But also, for the first time in days, I felt something like hope. I didn't sleep much that night. The physical pain was constant, but the emotional pain was worse. I kept replaying every moment of Virginia's life, looking for signs I should have seen. When had she turned into a monster? Or had she always been like this, and I had been too blinded by a mother's love to notice it? I remembered when she was 12 and her pet hamster died. She cried for days, or so I thought. Now I wondered if those tears had been real, or just another performance. I remembered her wedding to Ryan. I had paid for everything because they said they had no money. $20,000 on an event that lasted 6 hours. They didn't even include me in the important family photos. I remembered every forgotten birthday, every unreturned call, every broken promise. The signs had always been there. I just didn't want to see them. At 6 in the morning, I heard movement in the house. Rachel was making coffee, and Brian was talking on the phone in a low voice. I got up with difficulty, every muscle protesting. I looked at myself in the small mirror in the room and barely recognized the woman who looked back at me. Pale, with deep circles under my eyes, hair messy, but my eyes. My eyes had something new: determination, suppressed rage, a thirst for justice. I got dressed in the clothes Rachel had left for me, a long brown skirt and a long-sleeved cream-coloured shirt. They were a little big, but at least they were clean and not stained with blood like last night's. When I left the room, Brian was in the living room with his phone to his ear. He signalled for me to wait. Yes, I understand. A 67-year-old patient who just had surgery has disappeared from her room. This is extremely serious. No, I don't accept excuses. I want to speak with Director Roberts immediately. I see. How convenient that he isn't available. Then I'll speak with the assistant director. Yes, I'll wait. He covered the phone with his hand and whispered to me, "They're in a total panic. They say they checked your room at 6 this morning and you weren't there. They've been searching the entire hospital for the last half hour." I felt a dark satisfaction imagining Roberts receiving that news. I imagined his face filled with horror as he realized his victim had escaped. "Yes, I'm here," Brian said, turning back to the phone. "Assistant Director Mendez, I'm attorney Brian Miller, and I represent Mrs. Esmeralda Johnson. My client disappeared from your hospital under extremely suspicious circumstances. I demand immediate access to all security footage, her complete medical records, and the names of all staff who had contact with her in the last 24 hours. Furthermore, I want an explanation as to why Director Roberts is suddenly unavailable when a critical patient disappears under his supervision." There was a long pause. I could hear a shrill female voice on the other end, although I couldn't make out the words. "I don't care about your internal policies." Brian's voice became as hard as steel. "You have 2 hours to gather everything I've requested, or I will file a lawsuit not only for medical malpractice, but for possible involvement in an attempted murder. And believe me, Assistant Director, when the media finds out that a private hospital lost a recently operated elderly patient, your reputation will be destroyed." 2 hours. He hung up and looked at me with a fierce smile. The game has begun. Brian's phone started ringing 20 minutes later. It was an unknown number. He put it on speaker so we could all hear. Attorney Miller. The voice was male, soft and controlled. I immediately recognized that tone. It was Dr. Roberts. "Speaking. Who's calling?" "This is Dr. Roberts, Director of St. Mary's Hospital. I've just been informed of the situation with Mrs. Esmeralda Johnson. I want to assure you we're doing everything we can to locate her. We have staff searching the entire hospital. We've checked the security cameras." "And what did you find on those cameras?" There was a pause. "Nothing conclusive yet. It seems she left via the service stairs around 10 o'clock last night, but we lose her trail after that. How convenient that your cameras work in some places but not in others." Attorney Miller. "I assure you there is nothing sinister here. Mrs. Johnson just had surgery. She was likely confused by the medication. It's common in patients her age. She's probably just disoriented somewhere in the building." Brian looked at me and smiled before replying. "Dr. Roberts, I have news for you. My client isn't lost. She's with me. She's perfectly oriented and has many things to say about the conversations she overheard in your hospital." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could imagine Robert's face turning pale, his mind racing to figure out how much I knew, how much I had told. I don't know what you're referring to. His voice was tense now, the artificial smoothness gone. I think you do understand. But don't worry, everything will be clear soon, especially when I present the recordings my client made of certain compromising conversations. There were no recordings. It was a complete bluff. But it worked. Wait, attorney, he said. Maybe we can resolve this in a civilized way. If Mrs. Johnson has any complaint about her treatment, we can discuss it. I'm sure there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Brian repeated with sarcasm. That's an interesting way to refer to a plan to murder someone for money. That's a very serious accusation with no basis. I could sue you for defamation. Try it. In the meantime, I have a meeting with the police in 2 hours to file a formal report. I'm going to give them all the information about your little business with my client's daughter, and about the other 4 cases you mentioned in your conversation. Another silence. This one was longer, heavier. When Roberts spoke again, his voice had changed completely. He wasn't faking it anymore. Now he sounded dangerous. Attorney, you're making a very big mistake. You're interfering in matters you don't understand. There are powerful people involved in this. People who don't like it when others get into their business. Are you threatening me, Doctor? I'm advising you to be prudent, for your own good and your clients'. Thank you for the advice. It'll be useful when I play it for the judge. This call is being recorded, by the way. The sound of the call cutting off abruptly echoed in the room. Rachel had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide. My God, he just openly threatened you. I know, Brian said. And it's perfect. He put his phone away. Desperate people make mistakes. Roberts just confirmed there's something to hide. An innocent man doesn't make threats. An innocent man defends himself with facts. My own phone, which had been off since I escaped the hospital, started to vibrate on the table where Rachel had left it charging. Brian signaled for me not to touch it. Let it ring. Let's see who's calling. It was Virginia. She called 5 times in a row. Then text messages started coming in, which Brian read aloud. Mum, where are you? I'm so worried. The hospital says you disappeared. Please answer. Mum, if you're upset about something, we can talk. Just tell me where you are. This isn't funny. You're sick. You need medical care. Ryan and I are looking for you everywhere. Please, Mum. And finally, if you don't answer, I'm going to call the police and report you as a missing person. Tell her to answer, Brian said, handing me the phone. But just this. I'm fine. I have a lawyer. Don't look for me. With trembling hands, I typed exactly those words and sent them. Virginia's reply came in seconds. A lawyer? Why do you need a lawyer? Mum, you're scaring me. What did they tell you? Who put ideas in your head? I didn't answer. Brian told me to turn the phone off again. Perfect, he said. Now she knows you're conscious and protected. That's going to force her to make a move. She'll probably call Roberts. They'll argue. Maybe they'll fight. And when people fight, they say things they shouldn't. And now what do we do? I asked. Now we go to the police, he said. But not the local station. We're going directly to the federal prosecutor's office. I have contacts there. People who take crimes against the elderly seriously. He got up and started putting his laptop away. Mrs. Johnson, I need you to be prepared. They're going to ask you a lot of questions. They'll want every detail. You're going to have to relive that entire conversation you overheard. Are you ready? I'm ready. I also need you to understand something important. Once we file this report, there's no turning back. Your daughter is going to be arrested. She's going to face criminal charges. Her life as she knows it will be over. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? I thought about Virginia as a baby, as a little girl, about all the moments I had believed we were truly mother and daughter. I thought about the pain of betraying your own flesh and blood. But then I thought about Virginia standing in that office, negotiating my death with the coldness of someone buying an appliance. I thought about the other 4 victims Roberts had mentioned. I thought about all the mothers, fathers, and grandparents who had died in that hospital, believing it was God's will when it was really murder for money. I'm completely sure. She stopped being my daughter when she decided to kill me. Now she's just a criminal who needs to pay for what she did. Brian nodded in approval. Then let's go. Rachel, can you stay here in case anyone comes looking for Esmeralda? Of course. I have a baseball bat under my bed and I'm not afraid to use it. We left the house through the back door, toward where Brian had parked his rental car. It was a grey sedan, discreet, perfect for not attracting attention. He helped me get in. Every movement was still painful, but the anger gave me strength I didn't know I had. As we drove toward the city, I looked out the window at the streets I had known my whole life. My neighborhood, the bakery where I bought pastries on Sundays, the park where Virginia played as a child. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. What are you thinking about? Brian asked. I'm thinking about how I spent 67 years trying to be good, trying to be the perfect mother, the woman who never causes problems, who always forgives, who always understands. And all I got was for my own daughter to think she could kill me without consequences. It wasn't your fault. I know, but it still hurts. It hurts to know that being good doesn't protect you, that loving doesn't guarantee you'll be loved back. We arrived at a large building downtown. Federal offices, the sign said. Brian helped me out, and we went in through thick glass doors that opened with a key card. I have an appointment with Prosecutor Ryan Martinez, Brian told the receptionist. They led us to an office on the 5th floor. Prosecutor Martinez was a man in his 50s, with an impeccable suit and a serious expression. He shook our hands and invited us to sit down. Brian told me something about your case on the phone, Mrs. Johnson, but I need to hear everything from you directly, from the beginning, without leaving anything out. And so, for the 3rd time in 24 hours, I told my story. But this time was different. This time it wasn't just a release. It was an official statement. It was the beginning of the end for Virginia and Roberts. Prosecutor Martinez listened to my entire story without interrupting. He took notes in a yellow legal pad, his expression becoming more serious with every detail I revealed. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. Mrs. Johnson, what you're describing is much more serious than I imagined. We're not just talking about an attempted murder. We're talking about a criminal organization operating inside a private hospital. He stood up and started pacing his office. If Dr. Roberts really confessed to having done this 4 times before, we need to identify those victims. We need to exhume bodies, review death certificates, investigate suspicious property transfers. How long will all that take? Brian asked. Months, maybe years for a complete case. But I can get immediate arrest warrants based on Mrs. Johnson's testimony and the phone threats Roberts made to you this morning. Martinez sat down again. The problem is, we need more evidence for the charges to stick. Testimony alone isn't enough. We need something concrete. The documents I signed, I said. Virginia said they were already recorded, that as soon as I died, the property would automatically pass to her name. Exactly. Those documents are key. Martinez picked up his phone. I'm going to send investigators to the Public Property Registry right now. If those papers exist, we'll find them. I'll also get a warrant to review all bank accounts for Virginia, Ryan, and Dr. Roberts. Money movements always leave a trail. What about the other cases? I asked. The other 4 people Roberts mentioned. Their families deserve to know the truth. You're right. I'm going to request access to all death records at St. Mary's Hospital for the last 5 years. We'll look for patterns. Elderly patients, simple surgeries, unexpected deaths, immediate property transfers after the death. If we find even 2 cases similar to yours, we can prove it's a systematic pattern. Brian leaned forward. Prosecutor, in the meantime, my client is in danger. Roberts and Virginia know she's alive and talking. I don't think they'll just sit still waiting to be arrested. I agree, Mrs. Johnson. I need to place you under witness protection until we arrest the suspects. Witness protection? What does that mean? It means federal agents will guard you 24 hours a day. You'll stay in a safe house. You won't be able to contact anyone outside the investigation circle. You won't be able to go out without an escort. It will be inconvenient, but necessary. The idea of being locked up, hidden like a criminal when I was the victim, made my stomach churn. But I knew he was right. Virginia had shown she was capable of anything for money. She wouldn't hesitate to finish the job if she had the chance. For how long? With any luck, just a few days. I'm going to move on this fast. I have enough to get arrest warrants this very afternoon. Martinez pressed a button on his phone. Marta, connect me with Judge Fernandez. I need urgent arrest warrants. The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of activity. More agents arrived. They took my official statement on video. They photographed my surgical wounds as evidence of the medical procedure. They had me sign dozens of documents I barely read, trusting Brian to review every word. In the mid-afternoon, 2 federal agents, a young woman and a young man, both in dark suits, escorted me to an unmarked car. Rachel had brought a suitcase with clothes for me, and I said goodbye to her with a long embrace. You're going to be okay, she whispered in my ear. You're stronger than you think. Thank you for everything, Rachel. For taking me in. For believing me. For not abandoning me. We've been friends since we were 10 years old, Esmeralda. 40 years of not talking doesn't change that. I would never abandon you. The safe house turned out to be a small apartment in an anonymous building in the suburbs. 2 bedrooms, a basic kitchen, windows with thick curtains that had to remain closed all the time. The agents took turns guarding the door, one inside and one in the hallway. That first night in the safe house, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed like Virginia coming for me. I sat on the sofa looking at the ceiling, thinking about how my life had completely changed in less than a week. 8 days ago, I was just an elderly woman living quietly in her house, cooking tamales, watching TV, waiting for calls from a daughter who rarely called. Now I was a protected witness in a federal criminal case, my own flesh and blood, facing charges of attempted murder. My phone, which the agents had checked and approved, vibrated with a message. It was Brian. Good news. We found the documents at the registry. Just as we suspected, Virginia registered a property transfer in case of death. The papers you signed weren't medical forms. They were legal documents for estate transfer. This proves premeditation. We also found 3 similar cases at the hospital in the last 4 years. Elderly patients, simple surgeries, sudden deaths, immediate property transfers. The arrest warrants are signed. Tomorrow at dawn, Virginia, Ryan, and Roberts will be arrested simultaneously. I read the message 3 times. Tomorrow. Tomorrow my daughter would be arrested. Tomorrow the world would know she had tried to murder her own mother for a property. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relieved. But all I felt was a huge void where my mother's heart had once been. I replied, "Thank you, Brian, for everything. Rest, Mrs. Johnson. Your justice begins tomorrow." But I didn't rest. I stayed awake all night, imagining the moment of the arrest. Would Virginia scream? Would she cry? Would she try to deny everything? Or would she finally show her true, unmasked face? At 5 in the morning, one of the agents brought me coffee. Prosecutor Martinez authorized you to watch the news if you want. The arrests will begin in an hour. It'll probably be on all the channels. I turned on the TV and waited. The morning news showed the weather, traffic, unimportant stories. And then, at 6:30 in the morning, the screen switched to a special alert. Federal operation at a private hospital. Director arrested for patient murders. My heart beat faster. There was St. Mary's Hospital on the screen, surrounded by patrol cars with their lights on. Federal agents entering in formation. And then, the image I had been both waiting for and dreading. Dr. Roberts being led out of the hospital in handcuffs, his white coat now wrinkled and stained, his panicked face captured by dozens of cameras. He was no longer the elegant man with a perfect smile. He was a criminal, being displayed for the world. Dr. Marcus Roberts, director of St. Mary's Hospital, was arrested this morning, accused of multiple murders of elderly patients for financial gain. According to sources from the prosecutor's office, he operated a criminal network that included family members of the victims. The image then changed to another scene. A house in a neighborhood I recognized. Virginia's house, agents knocking on the door, Ryan opening it in his pajamas looking confused, and then Virginia appearing behind him, and her face when she saw the handcuffs. That face will be etched in my memory forever. It wasn't fear. It wasn't surprise. It was pure rage. Rage that her plan had failed. Rage that she had been caught. She screamed something the cameras didn't capture clearly, but I knew what she was saying. She was cursing. She was blaming me. Even in her moment of defeat, I was the villain in her story. I watched the arrests repeated on every news channel. Each station had a different angle, but the story was the same. A respectable hospital turned into a scene of murders for money. A daughter who tried to kill her mother. A doctor who betrayed his Hippocratic oath. My name didn't appear in the initial news reports. Prosecutor Martinez had protected me, referring to me only as the surviving victim who exposed the criminal network. But I knew it was only a matter of time before my identity came to light. In small towns like ours, secrets didn't last long. Brian arrived at the apartment that afternoon with a tired smile and a thick folder under his arm. "We have more than we expected," he said, collapsing onto the sofa. "When they arrested Roberts, he tried to make a deal. He offered to provide information about other cases in exchange for a reduced sentence." And what did he say? He confirmed the 4 previous cases. He gave us names, dates, amounts. He even kept records. Can you believe it? He had a notebook hidden in his office with everything documented. The amounts he received, the properties transferred, the methods used. The man is a sociopath, but he's also meticulous. Why would someone keep evidence of their own crimes? Ego, control, or maybe as insurance in case his partners tried to betray him. Brian opened the folder. Here are the confirmed victims. Mr. Stephen Vargas, 72, died after hip surgery. His niece inherited a house valued at $500,000. Mrs. Amalia Reyes, 70. I stopped him. "You said Amalia Reyes?" "Yes. She's the mother of the nurse who helped me escape. Jade told me her mother had died in that hospital, and that she always suspected something wasn't right." Brian closed his eyes, processing the information. "So Nurse Jade not only saved you, she used you to avenge her own mother. Brilliant and understandable. Where is she now? Did they arrest her too?" "No. She cooperated with the investigation from the beginning. In fact, she went to the prosecutor with additional information about irregularities at the hospital. She's being treated as a protected witness, just like you. I felt relieved. Jade didn't deserve to be punished for helping me. She had lost her mother to the same greed that almost killed me. And Virginia? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. What did she say when they arrested her? Brian hesitated. Are you sure you want to know? I need to know. She denied everything. She said you were senile, that you were making up stories, that the documents you signed were legitimate, and that you knew exactly what you were signing. She blamed Dr. Roberts for manipulating her. She said he convinced her that you wanted to die, that you were suffering, and it was an act of mercy. The words hit me like punches. Even now, caught, exposed, Virginia was still denying her guilt. She was still trying to paint me as the crazy, confused, lying one. And Ryan? He broke down in the first hour of questioning. He confessed everything. He said Virginia planned it all for months, that she was the one who contacted Roberts, who investigated his previous cases, who convinced him to include her in the next plan. Ryan says he was just following orders, that he was afraid of Virginia. Afraid of Virginia? Apparently your daughter has a temper she kept hidden. Ryan showed pictures of bruises, threatening messages. He says she controlled all the money, all the decisions, that if he didn't cooperate, she would leave him with nothing. A twisted part of me felt something like satisfaction. Virginia had spent years making me feel small, insignificant, dramatic. Now the world was seeing who she really was. The trial will be in 3 months, Brian continued. Roberts has already pleaded guilty in exchange for testifying against Virginia. Ryan will also cooperate. With his testimony plus yours, plus the documentary evidence, Virginia will face between 25 and 30 years in prison. 30 years. My daughter would spend the rest of her useful life in a cell. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. The following days were strange. I lived in that small apartment, protected but imprisoned. Rachel visited me twice a week, always escorted by agents. She brought me homemade food, magazines, neighborhood gossip I was no longer interested in. People are talking, she said during one of her visits. Some say you're brave. Others say a mother should never put her daughter in prison, no matter what she did. And what do you think? I think you did what you had to do. And I think the people who are criticizing you weren't in that hallway listening to their own daughter negotiate their death. Social media exploded when my name finally came out in the news. There were 2 clearly divided sides. Some called me a hero, a survivor, an example of strength. Others called me a traitor, an unnatural mother, a bitter old woman making up stories for attention. Virginia had managed to get some journalists to publish her version. Senile mother falsely accuses loving daughter, one headline read. Family misunderstanding ends in legal tragedy, said another. Brian had warned me not to read the comments, but I couldn't help it. I needed to know what people were saying, how they saw me. Mothers always exaggerate. I'm sure the daughter just wanted to help. Old people forget things. She probably signed everything voluntarily and now she doesn't remember. How sad that a family is destroyed over money. They should forgive each other and move on. Every ignorant comment infuriated me more. Forgive? Move on? As if planning a murder was a disagreement about where to spend Christmas. But there were other messages too. Hundreds, thousands of women sharing their own stories. Daughters who had stolen from their mothers. Sons who had abandoned their parents in horrible nursing homes. Families torn apart by inheritance, by greed, by a lack of real love. Thank you for being brave, one woman wrote. My sister tried something similar with my father. I didn't have the courage to report her. He died believing his daughter loved him. You saved lives, another wrote. If you hadn't spoken up, Roberts would still be killing elderly people without consequences. Those messages gave me strength. They reminded me why I had agreed to testify despite the pain, despite the public shame, despite knowing I would lose my daughter forever. I hadn't really lost her. I never had her. The Virginia I loved, the one who existed in my memories and hopes, was never real. She was an illusion I had created because I needed to believe my sacrifice had been worth it. A month after the arrests, Brian came with unexpected news. The families of the other victims want to meet you, he said. Specifically Nurse Jade and her siblings. Would you feel comfortable meeting with them? The meeting was arranged at the prosecutor's offices. It was a neutral, safe space, with enough privacy to share our pain without spectators. Jade arrived with two other people, a man in his 40s who introduced himself as her younger brother, and an older woman who turned out to be her aunt. They all had red eyes from crying so much. Mrs. Johnson, Jade hugged me tightly. Thank you. Thank you for having the courage I didn't have. You saved my life, Jade. I should be thanking you. When my mother died, I knew something was wrong. I felt it in my bones, but I had no proof, no way to prove it. My sister had manipulated everything perfectly. Tears flowed freely now. I spent 2 years hating myself for not doing anything. And then you came, and I heard your story, and I knew God was giving me a second chance. Her brother spoke then. Our older sister, the one who inherited everything, fled the country when the arrests were announced. She's somewhere in Europe spending the money from Mum's house, but at least now we know the truth. We know Mum didn't die of natural causes, that she was murdered, and even though we can't bring her back, we can honor her memory by making sure Roberts pays. The 3 months until the trial passed in a strange blur of legal preparations and therapy. Prosecutor Martinez insisted I see a psychologist specializing in family trauma. At first, I resisted. I wasn't crazy. I didn't need therapy. But Brian convinced me. It's not because you're crazy, Esmeralda. It's because no human being should have to process what you went through alone. You need help to heal. The doctor's name was Patricia. She was a woman in her 50s with a soft voice and infinite patience. In our first session, I just cried. I cried for 2 hours straight, releasing decades of pain I had kept hidden, pretending to be strong. Tell me about Virginia when she was a little girl, she asked in our third session. And so I began to dig into memories I had conveniently buried. I remembered things I had forgotten, like when Virginia was 8 and she drowned the neighbor's cat because it meowed too much. I had excused it as a childish accident. Or when she was 15 and stole money from my purse, and when I confronted her, she made me feel guilty for not trusting her. Or when she turned 21 and asked me to co-sign a loan she never paid, ruining my credit. The signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them because accepting them meant admitting I had failed as a mother. You didn't fail, Patricia said firmly. Virginia was born with something broken inside. Some people simply lack empathy. You can be the best mother in the world and still raise someone incapable of genuine love. It's not your fault. Those words released me from a guilt I had carried without knowing it. It wasn't my fault. I had done the best I could with what I had. The rest was Virginia's responsibility. Meanwhile, the case grew. Prosecutor Martinez discovered 2 additional victims, bringing the total to 7 elderly people murdered in 5 years. Each family had the same story. Simple surgery, unexpected death, quick property transfer, Dr. Roberts signing certificates without autopsies. The hospital faced multi-million-dollar lawsuits. Several staff members were fired for negligence. The board of directors resigned as a group. St. Mary's Hospital, which had been a respected institution for 30 years, was now synonymous with corruption and death. 2 weeks before the trial, I received a letter. It came from the prison where Virginia was awaiting trial. Brian handed it to me with a serious expression. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to." But I needed to read it. I needed to see if she would finally show some remorse, some humanity. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was Virginia's, that perfect calligraphy I had taught her when she was 6 years old. "Mum, I hope you're proud of yourself. You destroyed our family over a misunderstanding. All I did was think about your future, about making sure you didn't end up alone and abandoned in a horrible nursing home. But you, in your senile paranoia, misunderstood my intentions. You hired expensive lawyers. You humiliated me publicly. You took everything away from me. Now I'm in prison while you play the victim in front of the cameras. I hope you can live with that guilt. I hope that when you're really dying, alone because you no longer have family, you'll remember this moment and regret it. Your daughter who once loved you, Virginia." I read the letter 3 times, looking for even one word of apology, one acknowledgement of what she had done. There was nothing, just manipulation, gaslighting to the end, trying to make me feel guilty for surviving. "What does it say?" Brian asked. "It says she's still the same person who negotiated my death," I said. "It says she hasn't learned a thing." I tore the letter into small pieces. "And it confirms I made the right decision." The day of the trial came with a grey sky that threatened rain. I wore a dark grey pantsuit that Rachel had helped me choose. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. Just an elderly woman seeking justice. The courtroom was full. I recognized family members of the other victims, journalists with cameras, curious people who wanted to see the show. And there, at the defense table, was Virginia. She had dressed in a pale pink dress, her hair in a low ponytail, minimal makeup. She looked young, vulnerable, innocent. It was a calculated performance to generate sympathy. Our eyes met for a second. I expected to see hatred in her eyes, or at least rage. But what I saw was worse: indifference. She looked at me as you would look at a stranger on the street, as if I were irrelevant. The judge came in, and we all stood up. He was an older man, about 70, with a severe expression. He sat down, and the process began. Prosecutor Martinez presented the case with surgical precision. He showed the falsified documents, the bank transfers, the testimonies of Roberts and Ryan. He projected on large screens the conversations Virginia had had with Roberts, reconstructed from recovered phone records and emails. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Martinez said in a firm voice, "this is not a case of a family misunderstanding. This is not a worried daughter making difficult decisions for her sick mother. This is premeditated murder motivated by greed. Virginia Torres planned, organized, and almost executed the murder of her own mother for a property valued at $800,000. And when her plan failed, she showed no remorse. She showed rage at having been discovered. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my legs trembling. I swore to tell the truth on a Bible that was heavier than I expected. The prosecutor guided me through my story. Every question was a wound reopening. I described the surgery, the hallway, the exact words I had heard. My voice broke several times, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give Virginia the satisfaction of seeing me weak. "Mrs. Johnson," Martinez said, "do you have any doubt that your daughter was planning to kill you?" "No doubt at all." "And how do you feel about it?" The question took me by surprise. I looked at Virginia, who was watching me without expression. "I feel betrayed," I said. "I feel furious. But most of all, I feel free. free from the illusion that I ever had a daughter who loved me. The truth hurts, but the lie hurts more. Virginia's lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit, tried to discredit me during cross-examination. He suggested my post-operative medication had caused hallucinations. He suggested my age made me unreliable. He suggested I had misinterpreted an innocent conversation. "Mrs. Johnson, isn't it true that you voluntarily signed the transfer documents?" he asked. "I signed what my daughter told me were medical forms," I said. "She lied to me. Or maybe you didn't read them carefully, and now you're looking to blame someone else." "I read them with the trust of a mother who believes in her daughter," I replied. "That was my only mistake." "Isn't it possible that the conversation you claim to have overheard was about something completely different? That your mind, affected by the trauma of the surgery, created a narrative that didn't exist?" I leaned toward the microphone. "Young man, I heard my daughter offer $200,000 to Dr. Roberts to inject me with potassium chloride while I was asleep. I heard the doctor confirm he had done it 4 times before. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't confused. I was lucid and terrified. And your client knows exactly what she said because Dr. Roberts has already confirmed everything under oath." The lawyer had no response to that. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Testimonies, evidence, arguments. The families of the other victims also testified, each story more heartbreaking than the last. Finally, the jury retired to deliberate. They told us it could take days. It took 4 hours. When they returned, their faces said it all. On the charge of first-degree attempted murder, how does the jury find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how does the jury find the defendant? Guilty. Guilty on all counts. 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Virginia didn't react. She stayed seated, staring ahead, as if this were happening to someone else. Even in her defeat, she showed no real emotion. But I did react. I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. Justice. Finally. Justice. 6 months after the trial, I was finally able to return to my house. The estate Virginia had tried to steal from me was now completely mine again, with legal documents that no one could question. But when I crossed the threshold, I didn't feel the relief I expected. The house was full of ghosts, of memories of a life that no longer existed. Rachel helped me clean, to clear out Virginia's things that were still in her old room. Photos, clothes, school trophies. Everything went into boxes that I donated without a second glance. I didn't need reminders of a person who was never real. "What are you going to do now?" Rachel asked me as we drank coffee in the kitchen that had once been filled with the smell of tamales. "Live," I replied simply. "For the first time in 67 years, I'm going to live for me." And I did. I sold part of the estate, the farthest part that was only gathering weeds and bitter memories. With that money, I did 3 things I had never allowed myself to do. First, I created a legal fund for elderly victims of family abuse. Together with the families of Robert's other victims, we established a foundation that offered free legal representation to elderly people being manipulated or stolen from by their own children. We called it the Esmeralda's Hope Foundation, and in the first 6 months, we helped 27 people regain their properties and dignity. Second, I fulfilled a dream I'd had since I was a child, but always put off because of responsibilities, to travel. I bought a plane ticket to Europe and spent 3 months traveling through Spain, France, and Italy. I walked through ancient streets, ate food I couldn't pronounce, and sat in cafes watching life go by. For the first time, no one needed anything from me. I was gloriously free. In Rome, I met a group of women my age, all traveling alone for different reasons. Divorces, widowhood, ungrateful children. We became instant friends, sharing stories and wine on terraces with a view of the Colosseum. One of them, a Spanish woman named Mercedes, said something I'll never forget. We spend the first half of our lives being what others expect. The second half is for being who we really are. She was right. I had spent 67 years being the good mother, the obedient wife, the woman who never caused problems. The last years would be different. Third, when I returned home, I transformed part of the estate into a shelter for elderly women escaping abusive situations. Not a nursing home, but a temporary home where they could recover, receive legal advice, and plan their next steps. I hired Jade, the nurse who had saved me, as the medical coordinator. "This is what Mum would have wanted," Jade told me the day we opened the shelter. "For her death to have meaning, to save others." The shelter was called Renaissance House, and the demand was immediate. There were so many women trapped, so many stories like mine. They arrived scared, broken, convinced they deserved the mistreatment. They left strong, informed, and ready to reclaim their lives. One afternoon, a year after the trial, I received a letter. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but the sender was Federal Women's Prison. For a moment, I thought it was from Virginia, but the name was different. Ryan Torres. I hesitated to open it, but curiosity won. "Mrs. Johnson, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after what I did. I've accepted my sentence of 15 years, and every day I carry the guilt of having been an accomplice. But I need you to know something. Virginia manipulated me just as much as she manipulated you. I was her puppet. I lived in terror of contradicting her. That doesn't excuse me, but it's the truth. I testified against her not for revenge, but because I finally had the courage to tell the truth. I'll never expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that what you did, exposing all of us, saved more lives than you can imagine. There are 3 people in this prison who are also here for planning to kill their elderly parents. Your case opened up an investigation that caught them. You are a hero, even if you don't feel like it. With respect, Ryan." I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't forgive Ryan, but I understood he had also been a victim in his own way. Virginia had that talent, turning everyone around her into accomplices or victims. The media was still interested in my story. I turned down most interviews, but I accepted one with a show about female survivors. The interviewer asked me something no one else had dared to. "Do you ever miss her? Miss your daughter?" I thought hard before answering. "I miss the daughter I thought I had," I said. "I miss the illusion, but the real person, Virginia, I don't miss her. Because that person never loved me. And you can't miss what you never had." "Has she written to you? Have you spoken since the trial?" "She wrote to me once, blaming me for everything. I never replied. I have nothing to say to her. She made her decisions. I made mine. We are nothing to each other anymore." If you could say one thing to other women in similar situations, what would it be? That blood doesn't mean loyalty. That being a mother doesn't mean you have to accept abuse. That it's okay to walk away from toxic people, even if they're family. That surviving isn't selfish, it's necessary. And that life after betrayal can be beautiful if you have the courage to rebuild it. 2 years later, on my 70th birthday, I threw a party at the estate. Not a small, quiet celebration like the ones I had before. I invited all the women who had come through Renaissance House, the families of Robert's victims, Brian and his family, and Rachel and her children. There were over 100 people in my yard, eating, laughing, celebrating life. Jade gave me a gift, a photo album of all the women we had helped. Each page had a photo and a message of gratitude. Tears ran down my cheeks as I flipped through it. Thank you for showing me I'm not crazy. Thank you for giving me courage. Thank you for proving we can start over. See, Jade said, your pain wasn't in vain. You saved all these lives. That night, after everyone had left, I sat alone on the porch, watching the stars. I thought about the entire journey from that hospital hallway, where I heard the words that changed my life, from the terror of that night to the peace of this moment. It hadn't been easy. There were nights of crying, days of doubt, moments when I questioned if it was worth it to destroy my own daughter. But then I remembered she was already destroyed on the inside. I just exposed the truth, and the truth, while painful, had set me free. I looked at my reflection in the window. A 70-year-old woman with wrinkles earned by experience, with silver hair, tired but peaceful eyes. She wasn't the woman who had entered that hospital 2 years ago. That woman had died in that hallway. This woman was new, reborn, free. And this woman, finally, was ready to live every day she had left on her own terms. Without guilt, without apologies, without fear. Because I had survived the worst thing a mother can face. And if I survived that, I could survive anything. The rest of my life would be mine, just mine. And that, I discovered, was the best gift I had ever given myself. The story of how my daughter tried to kill me had become the story of how I finally learned to live. And if anything good came out of all that darkness, it was this. I inspired other women to reclaim their lives too. One by one, we were rewriting the rules. We were no longer the silent women who accepted everything to keep the peace. We were warriors, survivors, phoenixes rising from the ashes. And I, Esmeralda Johnson, 67 years old when I almost died, and now 70 years old and living fully, was the living proof that it's never too late to start over. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to be free.